Hi friends, welcome to episode 14 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian for 12 years and counting, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that'll help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that the ideas expressed in this podcast are my own, or when appropriate, I cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. This past Monday, I visited a friend's library in an elementary school to fulfill an annual requirement in our contract called an instructional round. I look forward to this day every year. During our state conference in October, I ask around and narrow down my choice of which school library I'd like to visit this year. I do have to submit a request to my own district to provide coverage for my classes. Once I have approval, I offer several dates to my friend, and we found one day which was mutually convenient. It's never going to be on a Friday, as those are always the days for which the demand for substitute teachers is highest. This day always involves a commute for me, because I have taught in 8 of our 9 elementary school libraries. I'm happy to have the opportunity to get out of my district and to observe something completely new. Metro Detroit cannot compare to the legendary rush hour traffic in LA or Chicago or Boston, and because we have little public transportation infrastructure and construction which is notorious for running well past schedule, my drive took over an hour. I would have liked to have owned a helicopter at this particular day because I could have at any point walked faster to my final destination. I checked in with the main office, and I received a visitor's badge on a lovely neon lanyard, so much for blending in, or at the very least, not attracting attention while students were supposed to not notice the random stranger observing them from behind some bookshelves. I always try and arrive in plenty of time before any of the classes arrive. I did look something like a tourist for the first 15 minutes, taking pictures of everything. I like to survey the space and the layout. Without a building tour, it can be a little challenging to see how the library is situated with respect to the building as a whole. Is this the hub of the school, or are we off in a wing or a separate floor? In all of my own libraries, the library is a destination on a floor with its own entrances, and it's typically at the end of a hall. I notice everything, including the placement of spine labels, classification labels, barcode placement, school designation stamps, or a sticker. I look at displays and prominent features in this collection. Is it genreified? Is it partially genreified? How is this space being utilized? Is the library supporting other needs inside the library space? For example, building tours for prospective families, workspace for PTO projects, and consultants having grade-level meetings with teachers. I notice how the library assistant is utilized and how the different roles and responsibilities are divided up. When I watch the librarian, I always look for how they interact, how they instruct, what routines are in place, what attention-grabbing techniques are used, how is book checkout configured, as well as where do the students land when they're waiting for their teacher at the end of their library visit. I did want to share something out that I especially enjoyed, and I took lots of pictures so I could fashion something like this in my own libraries, and this was called Shelfies. Each week, one student from each grade level and one staff member was chosen to have their book selections displayed. This project does require available shelf space, one shelf allocated per grade level with one shelf for the staff member. This was very similar to a bookstore staff recommendation feature. Each shelf had a decorated chalkboard with the student's name and their grade, and room for 5 to 6 books fanned out. These shelves would need to be replenished throughout the week when kids picked off the display. As it was explained to me, this undertaking was exclusively the responsibility of the library assistant, who randomly selected a representative from each grade each week, as well as a staff member. The assistant would also need to keep track of the students which had been picked over the course of the year to ensure some fairness. As I mentioned in last week's episode, instructional rounds can be extremely beneficial. Consider approaching your building administration with a request to do something similar in your district. I'm lucky that my district recognizes this and allocates sub-coverage to make this day possible. I came back with pages and pages of notes and ideas and book titles and lots of pictures of projects, big and small, that I'd like to incorporate into my own library program. I also followed up and texted back my friend with some photos of my own library in order for us to share some resources and swap some lesson ideas. This is a great way to network with fellow librarians in your neighborhood. Join me today as we tackle the issue of the holidays in your library. First of all, I'd like to address how the holidays affect the dynamic of the entire school building, regardless if your building is an elementary or middle or high school, as well as how it affects our library routines. This can apply to most of the month of December. I recently heard the term Hanukkah High coined, and it is exactly that to which I'm alluding. The kids are off schedule, their sleep schedule, they're overtired, there are parties every night. With a week or more of celebrating and visiting family, it means that kids come to school very wired, overtired, and it reminds me a lot of the Monday after Super Bowl Sunday. The kids are just not themselves. This is compounded by the fact that there are lots of teacher absences in the month of December. Many teachers and staff will use their personal day for shopping, and this means that the kids are particularly agitated and wound up with all the guest teachers that are in the building. Look for a future episode on substitute teachers in the library. And the following is really more for elementary libraries and elementary buildings, but there are many interruptions, especially in this week coming up. There are holiday concerts, rehearsals during the day, concerts at night, which can make for a very long day with our evening obligations. Librarians happen to make excellent supervisors because, unlike the grade level teachers, we know all the students. During the last few days before break, there are assemblies. One of my schools has a yo-yo demonstration. Another one of my buildings shows the movie Polar Express in the gym, while the teachers rotate and clean their rooms and prepare them for the building shutdown. Some of my students will participate in a pajama day, which means that blankets and stuffed animals will be accompanying the students up to the library. Parties. Sometimes these will supersede your library visit, but I always make an effort to send out an email and offer to either help or to combine classes so that the parents on the party committee have time to set up without the students in the room. Depending on your schedule, you are missing classes. You might be supervising assemblies or rescheduling to make up for missed checkouts. For example, tomorrow, the fifth graders in one of our buildings is having their instrumental program featured in the gym for an all-school assembly. This 30-minute program happens during my fourth grade lesson and their visit to the library. So I exchanged emails with the teacher and I confirmed logistics and assure her that a checkout will happen before lunch if the program should run long. On Monday afternoon, my first graders have a walking field trip to the middle school to rehearse for their evening vocal concert. Because I have 2 other classes to teach that afternoon, I'm technically off the hook, and I'll push whatever lessons I had planned to another date. So what about decorations? When I worked in one library, my library was decorated as soon as we returned from Thanksgiving break. I had sewn valances with a pretty holly pattern for my 7 picture windows. My library became the repository for all excess decorations from my own house, as well as items I found at garage sales and church rummage sales. My assistants, these would be students, helped string garland and bows around the perimeter, and those lit up. They decorated 2 artificial 5-foot-tall Christmas trees with ornaments, and we filled the top shelf of each bookcase, which was too high to have books displayed in them, with snowman figurines and stuffed reindeer. When I left this library 5 years ago, I decided to leave all the decorations behind, with the hopes that whomever replaced me, they might consider continuing the tradition. My current job has me covering 5 libraries, and each one has a different approach to decorating for the holidays. Some years, the library hosts a Saturday breakfast with Santa, and the PTO will decorate the library. In other cases, decorations are brought down from storage, and the assistants will decorate the libraries. The libraries also sometimes acquire decorations when the PTO hosts a holiday staff luncheon, which invariably happens in the library. When it comes to displays, remember when you're pulling books to display for the holidays, not just to pull picture books, but also holiday chapter books, holiday cookbooks and craft books, as well as holidays around the world in the 390s. I am not skilled in the way of creating showcases or bulletin boards, so when a library assistant has an inspiration, these are typically winter-themed, so we can extend the duration of the showcase or the bulletin board from Thanksgiving through to Valentine's, and then March's Reading Month is right around the corner. In the past, I haven't chosen to read Christmas books to my students, and they'll ask me, "Are we reading Christmas stories today?" And I will tell them, actually, my job is to show you where to find the Christmas books in the library, and you can read whichever ones you like. Despite my decision to decorate my first library, I really do try to be sensitive to my students who don't celebrate Christmas. I am aware that most classes do some sort of Christmas activities during this month, and many spend time making presents for their families. I don't read the Christmas stories, and this is a great opportunity, along with Halloween and Thanksgiving, to do a mini lesson on holiday spine labels. I point out that my holiday books are interspersed with my picture books and my craft books and my cookbooks, and we have to use our detective eyes to find them. So what about my collection? When last I checked, one of my libraries had 246 Christmas titles. These included not only picture books, but the craft books and the cookbooks, and Christmas Celebrated Around the World books. And suffice it to say, this will not be a purchasing priority, but rather a reading priority. Admittedly, I can't speak to the representation of diverse holidays in my collection right now. Were I to spend any money on holiday books, it would be on the other coinciding winter holidays. I do mention on the last day that I see these classes before break, that on this one occasion I do make the exception that book checkout is optional if you are traveling. Every year I have had at least one student lose a library book while on vacation, typically in the front pocket while seated on an airplane or left behind in some out-of-state restaurant. I do have some great stories of books being returned from all sorts of places, and I'm going to save that for a future episode, but I have never had experience of a library book being returned by an airline once the cleaning crew has boarded. I did want to share with you, and anybody who's interested, the YouTube playlist, which I created called Christmas Dance Party. I'll attach a link in the show notes. It's a compilation of Just Dance songs, animal videos, a fireplace scene, and a winter storm scene. While these may seem exclusively for elementary students, my sister, who teaches at the middle school, can verify that her students definitely enjoyed dancing to some of these videos. Some of my fellow librarians tell me that the fireplace and the snowstorm videos are fun to play for the students as book checkout is wrapping up. Students can read by the fire or listen to the storm as they read and wait for their teacher to come get them. I will announce the dance party to my class as something special that we'll do only after we finish the lesson and our book checkout. I do like to save the last 15 minutes of class so the kids are good and tired by the time their teacher comes to get them. When our checkout is ending, I announce that we're going to start the dance party, and I give my students several options. They can either dance or sit on our risers or our reading rug and read or talk quietly with their friends. I do have to outline some rules for dancing, as this has been known to devolve into a full contact sport, and at least one request for an ice pack from the office. I do indicate where the dancing can take place and where it is off limits, and this is important because of the bookcases. Otherwise, the students would be doing a conga line between the bookshelves. I do forbid any rolling on the ground. Only their feet can be on the ground. If you don't say this, you end up with a lot of kids who are on the ground for some reason I'm not quite sure, and somebody's going to get hurt. I also remind the students not to pull at each other or loop their arms. And lastly, they do have to leave the tables and the chairs alone. Once in a while, teachers will see their classes dancing, and their response isn't always approving. The "thanks, Amy, for getting them all wound up so they can come back to my room" reaction is rare, but for the most part, the class has finished the dancing by the time the teacher comes to retrieve their students, and I tell them their kids had 10 minutes of cardio, and they're thrilled to get it out of their system before they go back to class. The kids are tired from dancing and all the excitement, and I do have other dance party playlists, which I use throughout the year. I'll post these as we get closer to those dates. This will be my last episode for 2018. I will return on January 6th with a new episode. I have an idea, which could be the focus for the upcoming episode, and I posted the following question on the AASL Connect discussion board titled, "It Made My Day When." I wrote, quote, "I typically teach 6 45-minute classes and work with approximately 150 students each day. Try as I may, I get hung up on the negative comment or comments, which taint the rest of my day for me. I do my best to focus on the good that happens in my library. However, when I come home, I'm asked, 'How was your day?' Invariably, I find myself revisiting that negative comment said to me. I'd like to devote an episode, at least, to that which makes our day and what we can do to encourage those experiences. At this point, I do my full disclosure. I host a podcast called School Librarians United. I invite your responses as a fun way to be included in the next podcast. I never use last names or district names. Your first name and state would be terrific. I would like to thank you for listening today. I'd like to wish you all a very happy new year and to thank you for being a part of this podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Share this podcast with other school librarians in your district and your PLN. Consider leaving a ratings at iTunes as it helps other school librarians learn about this podcast. I would like to thank composer Nazar Ryback at hooksounds.com for the music you've heard today. As always, I invite your feedback and contributions. Please email me at schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter. The next podcast will be recorded on January 6th. I hope you will tune in.